Hey there, TikTakers! Have you ever heard of the Pandoras Box? We are opening it today to share the story with you guys. It's one of the greatest legends in Greek mythology, and it's part of Pandora's story, the first woman on Earth. The most famous version is the one written in the 7th century before Christ by the poet Hesiod. It's a story about revenge, Zeus' revenge against men and against the titan Prometheus, who stole the sacred fire and gave it to them. The father of the gods got furious and made Hephaestus create the first woman out of clay. Each god gave her a different gift. Athena gave her wisdom, Apollo music, Aphrodite beauty, and Hermes eloquence. Zeus himself gave her life and called her Pandora, which means the all-gifted. He offered her to Prometheus as his wife, though he rejected her, knowing after his treason any gift that came from Zeus would be a trap. So he took her to his brother Epimetheus, who despite the warnings decided to marry her. As a wedding gift, Pandora got an oval jar and not a box as it's usually said, but a translation mistake led to this confusion. She also had specific orders not to open it under any circumstances. But among all her gifts, God had also given Pandora a great sense of curiosity, so she decided to open the jar anyway, to see what was inside. When she did so, all misfortune and evils left it, invading our world. Aging, sickness, insanity, vice, poverty, crime, they all spread out inevitably. There was only one last thing hidden in the bottom: hope. Pandora, when she realized what she had done, felt really sorry and wanted to fix the evil she had caused. She then started to wander the earth, offering men that hope, that one last thing she had left. Truth is, Pandora's myth depicts perfectly the completely masculine point of view they had in classic Greece, and generally in the ancient world. Those women who are curious and don't do as told by men are guilty of all evil. And it also reminds us of the origins of the world according to the Christian Bible, where Eve eats the forbidden fruit and because of her, all evils are released. Apart from this, it became very popular in Western culture, and it even led to informal expressions such as opening Pandora's box, when we want to say an action is gonna lead to bad consequences. Or hope is the last thing to die, referring to the last thing that was left inside the box. Pandora's myth continues with her own daughter, Pyrrha, who married Deucalion, Prometheus' son. When Zeus decided to punish men by flooding the earth with torrential rain, they were the only survivors, and they decided to go ask the oracle how they could repopulate the earth. He told them they had to throw her mom's bones along the way, over their shoulders. Deucalion didn't understand this desecration, but Pyrrha explained that by mother he meant Gaia, the personification of the earth, and that by bones he meant rocks. So the stones they threw turned into men if they were thrown by Deucalion, or into women if they were thrown by Pyrrha. This turns us all into Pyrrha's descendants, and therefore Pandora's as well, the first woman ever who, despite having released all evils by accident, should also be remembered as humanity's grandma and the guardian of hope. In today's video, we're going to tell you about Persephone, also known as Kore, a goddess in Greek mythology. She was the goddess of vegetation and she brought fertility to the fields. But at the same time, she was the queen of the underworld and she carried out humans' curses upon the souls of the dead. Through their stories, the Greeks found an explanation to the phenomenon of the 4 seasons of the year. Persephone is the daughter of Zeus, father of the gods and king of the Olympus, and Demeter, the mother goddess of agriculture. The origin of her name isn't very clear. Perhaps it comes from Persephone, which means the one who threshes the wheat. But it may also come from the expression Pharian phonon, meaning the one who brings death. There are also several theories about her story, but the most complete is the one in the Homeric hymns, from the poet Homer. The hymn to Demeter, specifically, says Persephone used to live with her mother, far from the rest of the gods in the Olympus. However, she stood out so much because of her beauty that she had several suitors. Among them, there were Hermes, god of wit, Ares, god of war, Apollo, god of arts, and Hephaestus, god of fire and forges. However, her mom Demeter rejected all the presents and marriage proposals and hid her daughter from all the Olympic gods. One of the suitors who insisted the most was Hades, god of the underworld, king of the dead. He decided to ask his brother Zeus, Persephone's dad, to marry her, and he got a yes as an answer. But Demeter would never let her daughter go down to the underworld. So he planned to kidnap her and take her with him to his territory. One day, Persephone was innocently picking flowers in a field in Aegna, in the island of Sicily. Apart from some nymphs, she was with Athena, goddess of wisdom, and Artemis, goddess of animals. When she leaned to pick a daffodil, there was an explosion and a crack appeared on the ground. Hades came through it, and without any opposition, he put Persephone on his cart and took her to the underworld. Nymphs were punished for not interfering by turning into mermaids, and poor Demeter was just devastated. She gave everything up to dedicate full time to the search of her daughter, non-stop to the edge of the earth. Helped by the torches of Hecate, goddess of crossroads and virgin soil. As the goddess of agriculture, Demeter's obsession obviously had an effect upon nature. According to some versions, she forbid to plant on the grounds. According to some others, she just neglected her work as the mother of agriculture, devastated, and fields lost their fertility. Hecate suggested Demeter to ask Helios, the personification of the sun who sees everything, to try and find out what had happened, and he finally let her know where her daughter was. Zeus, pressured on one hand by the cries of starving humans due to the lack of harvest, and on the other hand by Demeter's cries, accepted and decided to take part. He made Hades free Persephone by sending Hermes, god of wit, to rescue her. Hermes strongly negotiated with Hades and in the end was able to convince him. One of the conditions there were for Persephone to leave the underworld was that she couldn't eat any food from there. And precisely the sadness she felt during her captivity hadn't let her try any food at all. But before she could leave the underworld, Hades tricked her to eat 6 seeds of a pomegranate. Hermes took her back successfully, but punished for having eaten food from the underworld, she had to go back every year 1 month for each seed she had eaten. From then on, she would spend 6 months of every year in the Olympus with her mother, and another 6 months in the underworld with Hades. When Demeter and her daughter were together, the earth flourished with vegetation, but during the other half of the year, it went back to being a sterile soil. And this is how the Greeks explained the cycle of the 4 seasons and its effect upon nature. Apart from this myth, Persephone is present in many other classic myths, such as the story of Orpheus, the musician who descended to hell to have his dead wife back. Persephone was so moved by hearing him play music that she allowed them both to go back to Earth. Or the myth of Adonis, a young man who was so handsome that even Aphrodite herself, goddess of beauty, fell in love with him. She was the one who sent him to Persephone so she could take care of him, but she wasn't counting on the queen of the underworld also being obsessed with him and not wanting to send him back to her. The fight was ended by Zeus, who decided Adonis would spend one part of the year with each. Persephone appeared in several plays of the Greek classic art. She usually wears a gun and carries a bunch of hay, though she can also be carrying a scepter or a little box. She was also the protagonist, along with her mother, of the Eleusinian Mysteries, a ritual celebrated during sowing time, where they celebrated their return to Earth and promised their believers a better destiny in the underworld. Persephone's myth, apart from being very interesting, is also one of the clearest ways to see how Greeks related to their gods, and especially how they tried to interpret phenomena that didn't have an explanation. Hey there, TikTakers! We know by your comments that you like Greek mythology a lot, and you always ask us for more videos talking about legendary characters in this culture. Well, today we have one of the most requested ones, the story of the goddess of justice, Nemesis. This goddess doesn't have a very clear origin. Numerous sources introduce her as the daughter of Erebus and Nyx, god of darkness and goddess of the night, though others describe her as the daughter of Oceanus or Zeus. But they all agree that Nemesis is part of the first generation of primordial deities, which in Greek mythology refers to the gods and goddesses that exist since the beginning of times and that are usually identified with the natural elements or principles. This is so because her parents, Erebus and Nyx, were born from Chaos, one of the 4 primordial deities, along with Gaia, Tartarus, and Eros. For the Greeks, they represented all there is before the gods and the elemental forces, that is, the original state of the cosmos. The origin of the name Nemesis comes from the Greek verb nemein, which means to give what is due, an obvious reference to her virtues as a goddess. Because in Greek mythology, Nemesis was the goddess of revenge, balance, and retributive justice. This meant applying the same punishment to the offender. In other words, if somebody killed someone, the sentence would be the same for the guilty one, death in this case. An eye for an eye, we could say. Even though nowadays our penal system is completely different and tries to compensate for the damage caused, in the ancient world, retributive justice was a very important concept. Nemesis was also in charge of punishing for human excess, lack of moderation, pride, and arrogance. And in order to stop the chaos, she had to apply harsh punishment to those mortals that had been too favored by the goddess Fortuna. However, by interfering, she kept the universe balanced, another key concept for the Greek interpretation of the cosmos. As she is one of the symbols of justice, she is usually depicted holding an apple branch, a set of scales, or a sword on her left hand. Also, she usually wears a crown and sometimes a veil covering her head. Even though Nemesis doesn't have a protagonist role in Greek fables, she's present as a secondary character in many stories, always as someone in charge of keeping balance in other people's actions. One of the many stories there is tells that Zeus fell in love with her beauty, though he wasn't loved back. In order to escape from him, she changed her appearance repeatedly, until one day she turned into a goose. However, Zeus became a swan and chased her non-stop until he finally took control of her. From this union, Nemesis laid 2 eggs, and from them the twins Castor and Pollux and the beautiful Helen were born. People say the crucial role of Helen, who triggered the Trojan War, came from Nemesis herself, as a kind of revenge after Zeus' abuse. Another story where we can find Nemesis is that of Croesus, the last king of Lydia, whose kingdom was famous for its success and pleasures. In light of this, the goddess decided to lead him to a dangerous trip where he had to confront King Cyrus of Persia. After the adventure, Croesus ended up ruined and miserable, proving that no mortal can be excessively fortunate, so universal balance is not threatened. In Greek mythology, there is also the figure of Themis, the titaness of divine justice. Though compared to Nemesis, she was more serene and was in charge of establishing order and guiding humans on the right path. That's why those who ignored Themis' advice ended up facing Nemesis, who showed up to apply a furious punishment. And as a matter of interest, nowadays we tend to use the word Nemesis to refer to an enemy or an opponent, probably making reference to this goddess who, despite embodying justice, she represents its most irrational side. So be careful with your actions, tiktakers, as Nemesis' vengeance could fall upon you. Today, we want to share with you a classic tale with a very important moral: the myth of Arachne. Arachne was the daughter of Itmon, a dyer who would dye wool using Tyrian purple. They lived in Colophon, a seaside city in ancient Greece. Young Arachne was an extraordinary knitter, and her work was so delicate and elaborate that she received jobs from all over the world. Rumors about her outstanding talent soon started to spread, resulting in her self-confidence growing higher and higher. And unfortunately, she became arrogant, even boasting about being better than Athena, goddess of wisdom and handicraft. At first, the goddess didn't pay attention to the rumors going around, but once she discovered that Arachne had become so full of herself, that made Athena so mad that she made a decision. She disguised herself as an old lady and visited Arachne, warning her that offending the gods could be very dangerous. That was Athena's way of giving Arachne a chance to repent. However, far from that, the young knitter laughed at the warning instead. The goddess was absolutely furious and transformed back into her real form. And so she challenged Arachne to a knitting contest. Athena thought that once Arachne inevitably lost, that would demonstrate the inherent superiority of the goddess, and the mortal would have to apologize. So Athena proceeded to knit a tapestry showing the scene of her victory over Poseidon. Back then, she encouraged the citizens of Athens to name the city in her honor. That scene also represented the huge power of the gods and the terrible destiny humans could suffer if they ever challenged them. In a way, that tapestry was a graphic warning. Meanwhile, Arachne's tapestry represented everything except fear, showing the many romantic slips of the gods. She knitted the gods in their animal forms, committing different infidelities, such as Zeus cheating on Hera, with Leda, Europa, and Danae. Athena took Arachne's tapestry as a mocking insult. In her eyes, Arachne was calling the gods fools. But despite this, Athena couldn't deny the amazing skills of the young knitter. Her excellent work gave life to the scenes she knitted, something Athena had never seen nor done ever before. Arachne wouldn't stop boasting about her superior knitting skills, which ended up completely outraging the goddess of wisdom. Arachne's insulting attitude towards the gods was disrespectful and unforgivable to Athena, and thus she destroyed Arachne's tapestry and loom with all her fury. The loom's shadow fell on Arachne's head, who, filled with shame, decided to flee and end her own life. However, Athena felt pity for her, and instead of letting Arachne end herself, the goddess transformed her into a spider, the first spider in history. As you can see, TikTakers, Arachne's arrogance ended up in her being transformed into an insect. And it's not a coincidence that Athena chose this animal, since, as you know, spiders are great knitters too. The moral of this myth is that we should always remain humble no matter how skilled we are, and we should never believe that we are inherently superior to others. This story has inspired many different works of art, including one of the most famous paintings by Velázquez, The Fable of Arachne. This painting is colloquially known as The Spinners, and you can see depicted in it the most important moments of this myth. Arachne is usually depicted as a being that is part human, part spider. And in recent years, she served as the inspiration for the character of a Spider-Woman, a superheroine from Marvel Comics. So what do you say, TikTakers? Was transforming Arachne into a spider too harsh of a punishment? And do you think she learned her lesson? One of the mythological creatures that has aroused more interest over the time is the phoenix, a bird that has fascinated hundreds of cultures and people throughout history for being a universal symbol of rebirth and immortality. The word phoenix comes from the Greek word phoenix, which means red. This creature is usually depicted as a huge bird in flames with a golden body and scarlet wings, whose feathers radiate a great glow. It had great endurance, control over fire, and infinite wisdom. But undoubtedly, its most representative feature is the power to burn and rise from its ashes. Some fables claim that the phoenix lived in the deserts of Arabia, near a well of fresh waters where it bathed every day and sung a beautiful song. However, the truth is that its origins could not be situated in a single point on the map, since this creature is common to many civilizations, which have been building their own legends around it. Thus, we can find representation of the phoenix in China, Central America, or Egypt. It is in this last country where we find the first mythological references through the Greek historian Herodotus. For the ancient Egyptians, the equivalent to the phoenix was the benu, a sacred bird similar to a heron, with long legs and two large feathers on the head like a crest. The Egyptians associated it with the rise of the Nile, the sun, death, and rebirth. It was a creature that deemed it necessary to renew itself from time to time in order to acquire greater wisdom. That is why every 500 years a nest was built with beautiful aromatic branches. And while singing a beautiful song, it set on fire and burned with it until consumed by the flames. 3 days later, a new Benu was reborn from its ashes, stronger and wiser. Afterwards, Benu took its remains to Heliopolis, to the temple of the god Ra, initiating a new cycle of life with which to inspire the Egyptian people. On the other hand, we have the Christian version, in which the phoenix was a noble creature with strong principles born in the Garden of Eden, under the tree of good and evil. It is said that when Adam and Eve were expelled, the angel who banished them gave off a spark that burned a bird's nest, igniting it. But since the phoenix maintained its honor and refused to taste the forbidden fruit, immortality was granted, and instead of dying, obtained the power to be reborn from its ashes. Its mission since then has been to share the wisdom it had had since its origins in Eden, and to inspire all those who sought knowledge. But in addition to this gift, it also possessed the gift of strength, and it was said that its tears were capable of healing. Over time, this creature has become the image of physical and spiritual rebirth, personifying the power of fire, which purifies and bestows immortality. It also represents the sun, which dies at the end of each day and reappears at the next dawn. Today, it is also considered a figure of resilience, our ability to overcome difficult situations and adapt to them. That is why nowadays it is usual to hear expressions such as rise from the ashes or be reborn like the phoenix, showing the strong symbology that this creature still has on humanity. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, and if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!